General Manager Matthew Darche seems to believe the Islanders are a playoff team as they're presently constructed. We'll break down whether or not he's right and what the ceiling is for this team this year as of right now. All that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Gil Martin. I've been covering the New York Islanders for almost 2 decades, and I wrote the book Ice Wars on the history of the Islanders' rivalry with the Rangers from 1972 to the modern era. So glad you could join us today to talk a little Islanders hockey. We have got a packed show for you today. Is this Islanders team a playoff team as of right now? We'll talk a little bit about that. The Islanders did announce the hiring of 2 assistant coaches. We'll break that down and we'll continue our player-by-player review of the Islanders with Alexander Romanov. What is his future role with the team? We'll talk about that and a whole lot more on today's show. When he had his introductory press conference and in some of the statements he's made since, Matthew Darche, the new Islanders GM, indicated that he believes this team, as it is presently constituted, should make the playoffs if they stay healthy and, more or less don't get hit with the major injury bugs that they got hit with last year. And let's be honest, injuries hurt the Islanders in a lot of ways last year. You lost 2/3 of the top line that you thought you were going to have at the beginning of the season. You only got 30 games out of Matthew Barzal. Anthony Duclair played 5 games, got hurt, came back, was never the same player. So he was limited, even though Duclair actually played more games than 5. He was never really quite the same. And that's 2/3 of the guys you were expecting on your top line missing significant time. And your defense core, obviously, banged up. Noah Dobson misses 11 games. Ryan Pollock misses 8. Adam Pelech misses 22 games. Alexander Romanov misses 18 games. All of these players are missing time. Scott Mayfield misses 16 games. Now, some of those he was a scratch, but again, a lot of players missing a lot of time. And don't forget Semyon Varlamov, your backup goalie, missing almost the entire season. Gets hurt around Black Friday, the day after American Thanksgiving, not back. However, here's the thing. Based on what Darche has said so far, it does not appear that many major moves will be made right now. Darche has said he does not anticipate buying out Scott Mayfield or Pierre Engvall. He said that Anthony Duclair should be back, that things will be straightened out between him and Patrick Roy. He has basically said that he views Noah Dobson and Alexander Romanov as part of the core of this team. It brings you to the point where you realize this roster, the team that was last year, is not going to be all that different from the team that we're likely to see starting next season. And yeah, the number one pick might make the roster this year. Maybe not. Maybe Schaefer, if it's him, starts a year in college or goes back to junior. If it's Misa, again, maybe he goes to college. Maybe, maybe he goes back to junior. Even if, again, and every day, as I've discussed this, even if the number one pick does indeed spend the whole season on Long Island with the big club, even if that player stays healthy and plays 80 games out of 82, most 18-year-olds do not make a huge impact right away. They will flash their brilliance, but let's say they draft Michael Misa. He's not scoring 30 goals as a rookie. He may not even score 20 or 25, 20. You don't know. If Schaefer starts the season with the Islanders, plays the whole season with the Islanders, you're not plugging in an 18-year-old kid and seeing him get 60 points as a rookie. Highly, highly rare and unlikely. So if you come back with roughly the same roster where you're subtracting Brock Nelson and adding Callum Ritchie, and most of the rest of the team is essentially the same, yeah, maybe there's some changes here or there, but is this a playoff team? Is the Islanders organization making a tactical mistake here? And hear me out. To an extent, I agree with Matthew Darche. If this team stays healthy and plays to their potential, their ceiling remains roughly what it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. If everything goes right for this team, they can make the playoffs. Barely. The ceiling for this roster, as it is presently constructed, is a wild card team or a team that squeaks into the playoffs and most likely is eliminated in the first round fairly easily. Anybody who watched any long stretch of the Stanley Cup playoffs this year, just by watching, you don't even have to be a scout or a coach or an expert. If you're just a knowledgeable fan and you watched any games, even from the first round, Colorado, Dallas, okay, you saw the difference in skill and speed between the teams that were in the playoffs and the Islanders. And even teams that limped into the playoffs because of injuries, like the New Jersey Devils, were better than the Islanders. This team, if you keep if you keep 15 out of the 18 players or 19 out of 23 guys that you have on your roster, if you keep this core together and keep this roster more or less the same, at best, you're going to be one of the last teams to squeak into the playoffs, and you're going to get eliminated in the first round. And again, you're going to find yourself stuck in the muddy middle. I understand this season coming up will be, for Matthew Darche, a feeling out period. He's going to see firsthand what he has in all of these players on the roster, the prospects down in Bridgeport or in college or wherever, and he's going to get a feel for what this team is capable of, what they need. But to keep this team together, in my mind, remains not the best way to go. And the question I'm asking, and it's a rhetorical question, is ownership basically telling Matthew Darche, and did they tell Lou Lamoriello before him, you're not doing a rebuild. We want to win now. We want to sell tickets. We want a full building or as close to it as we can get. And we want, if necessary, one round of playoff revenue. If that's the case, ownership is being short-sighted. And this organization needs to take one step back, perhaps, to take two steps forward. They need to retool, and that doesn't mean just adding one or two players. It means changing the way this team is put together, not stripping it down and building it back up from the ground up, but certainly changing the dynamic, adding a player who can make an impact. And if that takes an extra year, then it probably means you take one step back to take two steps forward. And I'm okay with that. I would accept a year where the Islanders don't make the playoffs this year. Get a good draft pick, get rid of some of the older, slower players with bad contracts who are on the decline. You either trade them, buy them out, whatever it is, and you come back in a year and you, with the added cap space, you start adding quality players to get you where you need to go. Matthew Darche spoke about being a sustained winner in this league. To do that, you cannot just bring out the same core that this team has been bringing out for the last 4 seasons. You need to make some changes. It may be a slow process, and I'm not saying you do it all at once, but as a person who's been covering this team for a long time and rooting for them for even longer, the one thing I need to see is some hint of a new direction, some move that tells me, you know what? This year is the start of something different. That's what I need to see. And so far, I'm not really seeing it or hearing it from management, from Matthew Darche, from ownership, from anybody. We'll see if it gets any better, but that's what I'm looking to see at some point before training camp starts. We have got a lot more to get to on today's show. The Islanders hired some assistant coaches. We'll have a few more takeaways from the combine, which ended over the weekend. We'll also talk about Alexander Romanov's season and his potential future role with the Islanders. And for our Islanders' birthday today, a former first-round pick of the Islanders from Viking, Alberta, who went on to a very distinguished coaching career. We'll talk about that and a lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot when you need to hire like yesterday. The pressure is on, and every day without the right person is a setback to your business. That's exactly when Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you could speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. So the Islanders did announce 2 new assistant coaches. Every day, as you'll remember, John McClain, Tommy Albaline, they're no longer with the Islanders. They were Lou Lamoriello's hires. Now Patrick Waugh got to hire his own people. And voila, Ray Bennett and Bob Boughner have been announced as assistant coaches, joining Benoit DeRosier, who is the holdover that Patrick Waugh brought in himself, and goaltender coach Piero Greco also staying. Bennett spent 8 years with the Colorado Avalanche, the last 8 years as an assistant coach. He's been an NHL assistant for 24 years, including 10 years with the Blues and 6 with the Kings. He's also been involved in some international tournaments and was an assistant coach for Canada in 1998 at Nagano, Japan, where Canada, the women's team, won the silver medal. And he's been a head coach for Red Deer College and a few other organizations that he's held positions with. Boughner, last 3 years with the Red Wings as their associate coach. He has been the head coach of the Sharks. He was head coach in Florida. He had a winning record in Florida, not a winning record in San Jose. Was also an assistant with both the Sharks and the Blue Jackets. And he's also been a head coach of the Windsor Spitfires of the Ontario League and a few other positions. Look, clearly the Islanders needed to make changes here. Unfortunately, John McClain, Tommy Albaline did not get the job done. Hopefully, you're bringing in experienced guys who, incidentally, have worked both the NHL level and with juniors. So you're talking about people who, if they have to develop a Matthew Schaefer or a Michael Misa or a James Hagens, they've worked with the younger players before, and it would make sense that they can do it again. So overall, it looks like these are solid hires. Hopefully, we will get a little bit more insight into their roles as time goes on. But as of right now, these appear to be solid hires. And more importantly, Patrick Waugh is going to be able to work with people that he chooses, not people that are given to him by Lou Lamoriello. At the Combine, by the way, a friend, a roommate of Michael Misa made a comment. Malcolm Spence, who is also expected to be taken in the first round, had his press conference, was asked about the Sharks, and said, my roommate, Michael Misa, is hoping to go there. Take that with whatever grain of salt you wish. It doesn't seem to be anything against the Islanders, but it does seem to indicate that Misa, if given the chance, prefers to go to San Jose than to go to Long Island. Again, how important is a statement like that? I don't think it's vital. I mean, quite honestly, if the Islanders decide to pick Michael Misa, do I think he's going to say, nope, not going to go there, don't want to play on Long Island, sorry, see ya? No, I don't think that's going to be the case. But all indications coming out of the Combine seem to point in the direction of the New York Islanders leaning very heavily toward Matthew Schaefer as the first overall pick. And more scouts interviewed by The Athletic reiterating that Schaefer, to most of them, is the top pick in this draft. And I'll get into this a little bit more on a show later this week, but they're indicating it's Schaefer and then a gap, and then Misa and then a gap, and then you go to the next tier of players. Again, how much truth is there to that? How much of that is consensus? We don't know, but these are 5 or 6 different scouts interviewed and management types, front office types, and that seems to be the very heavy consensus among these people. But realistically, who Matthew Darche believes should be the choice, it's up to Matthew Darche. That's going to be what ultimately matters, and that's going to be who the Islanders decide to pick once this draft gets started. Again, is there a chance the Islanders trade the pick? Yes. Is it a high chance? No. And we'll see how it all plays out in a few weeks. We're getting closer and closer to the draft. We have got more to discuss on today's show. We continue our player-by-player look at the Islanders with Alexander Romanov. What is his role with the team? What did he do this year? What is his future like? Plus, we'll have our Islanders birthday of the day and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like playoff hockey, the energy, the rivalries, the nonstop action. With the Stanley Cup playoffs heating up, there's never been a better time to see it live. Game Time makes getting in the building fast and affordable. Game Time gives you last-minute deals, zone deals for deep discounts, panoramic seat views, and all-in pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ticket prices often drop the closer you get to puck drop, so you can score big without overpaying. You can save huge with zone deals. They pick the best seats at the lowest price, and those last-minute deals, you could save up to 60% off by buying at the last minute for sports, concert, comedy, and theater. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. We continue our player-by-player look at the Islanders, and we are starting to wind this down. But today, we take a look at Alexander Romanov. Romanov played 64 games for the Islanders this year, 4 goals, 20 points. He was a +5. He had 20 penalty minutes, all 4 of his goals coming at even strength. And he averaged 22 minutes and 18 seconds of ice time per game. That is a new career high by almost 2 full minutes. A minute and a half. And by the way, he played 17 fewer games this year than he did the previous season, but he only had 10 fewer hits and 6 fewer block shots. So Romanov picking up his play. Now, late in the season, he did seem to either be playing hurt or wear down a little bit, and that was certainly a concern. His defensive consistency suffered after a solid start to that over the course of the season. And look, Matthew Darche did indicate that he believes that Romanov is part of the core. He is a top 4 defenseman. Ideally, I think he's on your second pair. He seems to have worked fairly well most of the time with Noah Dobson. Again, more often than not, if you're paired with Noah Dobson, you got to make up for his poor positioning. And that sometimes costs the Islanders with sloppy play in their own zone. But that's something that, again, has to be figured out. I think Romanov overall had a B to B plus kind of a season. He was probably at a B plus to A minus until the last, let's say, 15, 20 games he played, and then his level of play certainly diminished over those last few games. And hopefully it was a health thing. He is a restricted free agent right now. And we don't know whether or not he's going to be back. Now, Darche did say, yeah, I think he's part of the core. He's 25 years old, left shot defenseman. But is he going to be back? And, you know, he's got the arbitration rights. If he goes to arbitration, you're probably talking something in the $4.5 million AAV. If he goes longer term, a bridge deal, 2 to 3 years, probably $5.5 million per. If he goes long term, if he goes the full 7 or 8 years, you're probably looking at $6.5 million a year to figure out, you know, that long-term situation. Here's the other question, though, and I'm just putting it out there. If Isaiah George is NHL ready, and if the Islanders select Matthew Schaefer, another left shot defenseman, in the first round, and he's ready, you would have Adam Pelech, you would have Isaiah George, you would have Matthew Schaefer, you have the possibility of re-signing for a lot less money either Riley or Perunovich. Could the Islanders look to trade Alexander Romanov? It would make a certain amount of sense. You probably could get something solid in return. But the question remains, you know, Darche did say he was part of the core. And I guess the other question, and this is a bigger picture question, is Darche just trying to talk these players up to increase their value in a trade potentially? Or does he genuinely believe that all these players that he mentioned are either part of the core or should not be bought out or whatever? We'll see. We are learning about Matthew Darche just like he is learning about the players in this organization. If Romanov is back, and I think he probably will be, he's going to be in the top 4 again. I think he's better suited to be a second pair defenseman. He can be physical. He needs to pick his spots with the physicality and not be caught out of position trying to make the big hit. That happens a little too often. So I'd like to see him cut down on that. He is capable of the occasional good offensive play, and we'll see what happens to him if he comes back. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. And today is the 63rd birthday of former Islanders center Brent Sutter, one of the Sutter brothers from Viking, Alberta, 6 feet, 188 pounds. First round pick, 17th overall by the Islanders in 1980. Played 3 games for the Isles in 80-81 and was on the last 2 of the 4 straight Stanley Cup winning teams in 82 and 83. Had 21 points in 20 playoff games in 82-83, including 10 goals and 11 assists. Scored a career-high 42 goals and 102 points in 84-85 for the Islanders. After being with the Islanders through the 91-92 season, early on he was traded to Chicago, and he finished his NHL career there. Later, coached in the Western Hockey League in juniors, coached the Devils and the Flames in the NHL, and then went back to the Red Deer Rebels of the WHL. And coached there as recently as 2020, 2021. One of his better games as an Islander, November 29th, 1983. Islanders visiting the St. Louis Arena to take on the Blues. Roland Mellons, the goalie for the Islanders, Rick Hines, in between the pipes for St. Louis. And our Islanders birthday of the day, Brent Sutter, opens up the scoring Less than 2 minutes into the game, Clark Gillies and Dennis Potvin with the assist. Islanders up 1-0. With the Islanders up 2-1, Brent Sutter makes it 3-1, 9:05 into the period on an unassisted goal. And then with 2 minutes and 2 seconds left in the first period, Brent Sutter completes the hat trick all in one period. Clark Gillies and Anders Kaller with the assist. Islanders up at that point 4-1, but the Blues come back. They end up tying it with less than a minute and a half left on a power play goal by Bernie Federko, and the game ends in a 5-5 tie. But for Brent Sutter, our Islanders' birthday of the day, he had the hat trick. He was a +3. He had 2 penalty minutes and 5 shots on goal. Brent Sutter, one of the famous Sutter brothers, is our Islanders' birthday of the day. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. You could find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you have a question, maybe a comment or a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, shoot us an email. The email address is lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You could follow the show on X at Locked On Isles. You could follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long. And it's great to talk Islanders hockey with you anytime. Everydayers, we're back tomorrow. We will go continuing our player-by-player look at this team with Grant Hutton, whether or not he's going to be back in the Islanders organization this year. Plus, more on the potential draft picks and any other Islanders news, notes, and happenings coming down the pike. So make sure you join us for that. And we are also working on a little crossover episode at some point this week with Joey Erickson of Locked On Stars to talk about that possible Jason Robertson deal. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.